Hey guys, this is ReiIndigo and welcome to my first YouTube channel. Now before I confirm your vibes, I want you guys to know that this list is limited to 30 anime that I have personally watched and enjoyed. This means that the criteria is all my own and not being on this list does not make it bad. I have included honorable mentions and things that I will watch next in my description below. Please comment if you want me to expound on any of these 30 animes, say more, or include stuff to talk about some other time. But with that in mind, enjoy the video. Anyone out there is like me, from time to time you might find yourself on the couch and relaxing and watching cooking shows on the Food Network. The anime that's closest to this in terms of overall presentation is Shokugeki no Soma. If you can get over all the plot jumps, lack of character developments, stripping, so much stripping, it's a really fun show and really light and palatable for everybody. Akame ga Kill is one of the most brutal anime I've ever seen, and I say that as a compliment. There are times where they will forego character development at times and trade for shock value. That could be an issue, but for me it adds so much weight to every encounter because unlike most anime, you don't have the feeling of, oh, they're gonna win this somehow, I haven't even seen his backstory yet. If they feel backed against a wall, it really feels so. Plot armor doesn't really exist for anybody. And by the end, you will feel very, very empty. But so are the characters. It's a wild ride from start to finish, and I really enjoyed not knowing where it would go next. As I was writing this up, I had no idea where Naruto belonged on this list. It was the very first anime I've ever seen and still holds special in my heart. I still have all those memories from my very first tournament arc, and I can still remember the Toonami preview of Sasuke vs Gaara in my head. Years later, some of these entrances and battles are still incredible. But looking back, I remember how much non-sequitur filler there was and how bored I was week to week at times. And most importantly, how contrived the ending was, to the point where it soured me on the series entirely. Looking at you, Black Zetsu, this is all your fault, man. But at the end of the day, this is one of those shows on the list that popularized anime for a new generation in the West, and still is a pillar of Shonen Jump. And when you see people running around with their arms behind their backs, you know what they're emulating. When making this list, I tried to hold myself to one rule. Only include anime that are either finished or have at least more than one season completed. However, I threw this out the window so I could make an exception for No Game No Life. The concept just intrigued me. In this world, there's no war, no murder, and no crime. Everything is settled via games. The species in this world have various physical traits that give them a leg up in these games. Meanwhile, humanity, or emanity in this sense, are the lowest species as they lack physical advantages. So this show relies on cunning and thinking for the characters to win, as humanity's greatest strength is their minds. Their goal is to carry humanity to greatness and eventually beating the god Ted in a game. While this show has gratuitous fan service and the occasional ass-pull, the grandiose music paired with the genius strategies they come up with culminate in a fun show that has potential to be great. While I don't have much of the newer generation of shonen anime on this list, I think that My Hero Academia is my favorite personally. What makes the series so different is the main character, Midoriya. Most main characters are brash hardheads who dive into things without thinking, without fear. He's the opposite in the sense that he feels more human. He's constantly scared and anxious and faces those fears all the time because he's human. And people complain that he cries all the time, but it's for that reason that makes him human. Plus he thinks a lot, which is really refreshing because that's really rare in battle shonen for main characters. Meanwhile, the main villain grows alongside the protagonist, and their growths in comparison are very fun to watch. To the point where a lot of people root for the villains exclusively. I don't even know that there are villain stands that existed. This show oozes Western influence, which is super interesting because you can look at All Might and it's very easy to make Superman comparisons. And for me, whenever I think of quirks and the idea of quirk singularity, it's very easy to think of X-Men in that same way. My general problem is that the pacing isn't really great all the time. Well, it is, but it's fast to a point. Because they release their animes in seasons over a period, and there's years in between. And I'm grateful for this, because Bones is incredible. My problem with this show is that Some moments tend to get shortened or cut into slideshows, which really takes away from some depth that could be given. That aside, I still can't wait for the rest of the show, and I'm following obviously the manga, and as incredible as that be, I can't wait for the next couple seasons to come out. Now this show is like the NBA fused with Dragon Ball Z. Have you imagined Steph Curry shooting from 80 feet from the basket and swishing? Or maybe a Blake Griffin type dunking from the foul line? Or maybe even a Rajon Rondo type who can make impossible passes? Even an Allen Iverson LeBron James hybrid who makes some shit shots that are impossible. If you can grasp all of that, then this show is for you. If you want an actual basketball anime, then Slam Dunk is great, but this is so much more fun. Also, let me know if you want me making an NBA comparison video for this show, because that would be amazing. When I was in high school, I joined an anime club. I know, crazy, right? The first thing they showed was the melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. And at this point in time, I was only watching shonen specifically, so I wrote this off as high school garbage. But a few episodes in, it quickly transforms from a wacky adventure to a science fiction novel about a girl who controls the f***ing universe, and if she's bored, she could destroy it. It quickly becomes a constant attempt of entertaining Haruhi in this world so she doesn't create another one. What makes this show so amazing for me is that it's so told out of order, to the point where you need to piece together the timeline and make guesses on what happens in between episodes. It creates really high rewatch value when going back to it, because when you watch it in order the second time, everything seems to click perfectly, the timeline fits. It's a testament to the level of detail in each episode that they had, as tiny details tied itself together with no plot holes whatsoever. The show has excellent self-awareness, funny humor, amazing backgrounds, and Kyon is great. The show is one of my first non-shonen anime, and it really opened me up to a lot of the weirder stuff that comes further on this list. How do you write about an overpowered character? In the case of The Disastrous Life of Psyche K, they decide to write around it. Psyche is an all-powerful psychic who really doesn't have any enemies because he's too powerful to begin with. This slice-of-life anime revolves around him trying to hide his powers and just live normally as any normal human would. But by doing so, it attracts the very same people he's trying to avoid. While Psyche himself is not charismatic, his friends are, and the show creates hilarious gags through their colorful attitudes and personalities around him, and can also create tension through hiding his secret from them. I don't really hear a lot about this anime too much, but I really recommend it to people. It was a great time. Attack on Titan is one of those shows that once you first watch it, you know what it's already going to be like. It starts off dark and gory immediately, and it quickly establishes that these titans are massive humanoid monsters that eat humans, and have been caving in society, to the point where humans hide themselves between 3 massive walls that protect them. However, as the story goes on, it quickly becomes so much deeper. It delves into class struggle, the idea of freedom, and the will of life. It's coming to a close so soon that I'm not really ready for it to end, but it deserves its flowers. And Levi is an incredible badass, man. It's worth watching just for him. I swear they put all the money into his scenes. While Naruto was the first anime I've watched, Dragon Ball was the first anime that I completed. While I was originally drawn in by Dragon Ball Z, I specifically want to talk about Dragon Ball. Watching Goku come of age is a spectacular time because you can watch every character grow around him. The planet isn't constantly at risk of exploding, and every progression feels natural. And so many of these characters here are put to the side in lieu of Saiyans and other aliens. They still hold such a special place in my heart, and their depth is unmatched. Especially Yamcha, man. They did you dirty. I know you ball out in Dragon Ball FighterZ, but I want so much more for you, dude. When I think about Space Dandy, I think about how immersive and imaginative the show is. It's a visually stimulating series about a bounty hunter named Dandy who collects rare aliens. While most works by Shinichiro Watanabe contain a main plotline, this is very loosely connected, meaning that episode to episode anything can happen. Some characters die or get stranded forever, so you can't really predict what's gonna happen, which makes it fun. Following Dandy, Meow, and QT was always an adventure in getting to see what different worlds they come across, and it was interesting and fun. While people compare this to one of Watanabe's other works on this list, It stands apart for me because it's a lighter, more visually intriguing show that doesn't really take itself seriously. When I was growing up, I wasn't really a massive fan of the mech genre aside from Power Rangers, but Gurren Lagann was one of the first ones on this list that changed my mind and opened me up to other ones on this list. The plotline is simple. Earth is forced to live underground and they fight to take back the surface. But this show has so much energy, diving into themes of revolution, determination, friendship, and grief. While the first half of the show contains the most emotional depth and is my favorite part of the series, the end of the anime is really a showstopper visually, with 40% of the budget being dumped to create this visual masterpiece. If you weren't already considering this, I urge you to take the leap. You won't regret it. Yu Yu Hakusho is a show that encapsulates a decade better than any other anime on this list. Yusuke is a street punk with a heart of gold who investigates demons and other events with his friends. It's simple in nature. But relative to its contemporaries, it focuses more on strategy and fighting than planet-destroying power. Even though at the end of the day they end up fighting opponents one-on-one while they watch like everyone else. But even then, it still has one of the best tournament arcs in anime history. The characters are really likable and iconic, and it encapsulates the 90s down to its style perfectly. Look at that fit, man. Ooh, that drip. What? This show is iconic as Yusuke's spirit gun, and I'm hoping that one day it gets the Shaman King Hunter x Hunter reboot that it deserves. If you want a more story-driven boxing anime, you should watch Hajime no Ippo. If you want a more realistic boxing anime, Ishido no Joe works. But if you want a boxing anime that's pure hype, Megalobox is the one. A human man boxes humans with robot exoskeletons. That's it. I don't need to say anything else, that's it. Like No Game No Life, Dr. Stone is another exception to this rule. I initially was kind of skeptical about this because the idea of a science anime might not work for me, and just the idea that everyone randomly turned to stone seemed contrived, and initially the characters were pretty one-dimensional. Luckily they threw them away for characters that are much better for the roles next to Senku. So for an anime overtly using science, it's really accurate to the point that there are detailed steps for everything that they do, to the point that there are warnings for some creations like gunpowder. And the way that they talk about the idea of science and the progression of humankind is so inspiring, and it's intriguing to watch him drag a civilization thousands of years in the future. And I'm really looking forward to the series goes, and I will 1,000,000% be tuned into the future. Kill la Kill is not a show for the unseasoned anime viewer. I think it's for someone who can understand the tropes and stereotypes and the cliche that the show is parodying. You need to get past the hypersexualization and the over-top fan service the show offers. It's a spectacular show. There's non-stop action at every corner, beautiful soundtracks, it's hilarious on every level, and it's a fun ride through and through. Full Metal Alchemist is a story that doesn't need any introduction. It's a gut-wrenching story about morality, pride, and the idea that no tool is inherently good or evil, but it's how it's used. I could talk more about the amazing character development and action, but you can hear that on anyone else on YouTube. I personally recommend Brotherhood over its original counterpart, as it had more room to work with, because the series was just ending when Brotherhood started, but the original was when the manga was only 6 volumes in. On a personal note, when I was in 10th grade, I was shown this series by my first girlfriend, and I was dumped by her 2 weeks later. It's kinda sad, so please, if you're listening to this, please put an F in the chat for me. It would really make my high school self happy. Assassination Classroom is not the edgy thriller the name implies. It's actually more heartfelt and a wonderful story that has you kinda crying at the end. An extremely powerful octopus alien destroys the moon and gives the Japanese government one chance to save Earth. To let him teach a classroom full of students and give them a year to kill him? I know the premise is nuts, but hear me out on this. The show quickly gets you to invest in all these 30 children, and you become to learn the many powers and abilities of this OP-ass alien, who they refer to as Koro-sensei. In doing so, the students learn assassination techniques, and Koro-sensei is able to help them achieve amazing grades at the end of it as well. And on top of that, you learn his motivations or why this all began, and it's really heartbreaking. It's never boring, and there's constant plot twists and humor. This show feels so different from the other ones on my list, and for that reason alone, it deserves a watch. Bobobo is about a man who listens to hair and fights with his nose hairs in order to fight an evil empire of hair hunters who want to shave the world bald. You heard that correctly. There's nothing that's hidden in this one. There's a lot of animes that are bizarre and strange, but this one really sticks out. I won't guarantee that everyone will like this though, as there's a lot of slapstick humor and borderline childish ones as well that easily can turn people off, but if you dig closer into it, you see the plays on classic cliches, and every character plays into it, which makes it even more funny, even the narrator. This anime is the dumbest one I've ever seen, and honestly one of the funniest ones I've ever seen. I would call it the funniest one I've ever seen, but I recently saw number 5, and that is by far the best, and I'll get to that later. Although I had started Dragon Ball and Naruto in middle school, it took me about 5 more years till I decided to tackle the last of the big 3. And I never knew that all this time it was the greatest of all of them. Like many others, it was overwhelming to see the amount of content in the show, and that's what I was initially turned off by it. But about 25 episodes in, I was hooked forever. What sets this apart from its contemporaries is the massive world building that Oda creates. He's a master of dropping little crumbs here and there about the massive world that is One Piece, and it really pays off to remember them. To the point that one offhand comment about a completely different place in one episode will return hundreds of years later, or a character that was multiple arcs ago will reconnect to another. This all serves to create a very interconnected map that is this universe for such an epic story. It leads to many emotional moments that may not be a massive power clash between the strongest of people. It ends up being the best manga of all time for me, but pacing really stops it from being the best anime of all time. Maybe if they do like a One Piece Kai, like a Dragon Ball type deal, man can dream, We're at number 10 now, so this means that everything is the god tier of anime for me. I like everything else below this too a lot, but these are the ones when someone asks me, what should I watch? It's these ones. Even for people that don't even watch anime, some of them on this list are very good for those people. And I know you'll hate me, so let's get into it. One Punch Man is the pinnacle of overpowered protagonists, exploring deeper themes that are beyond its main character. While some shows focus on the slow growth of the characters, Saitama is the opposite. He's already fully formed, defeating everyone in one punch. He doesn't need to struggle, level up, or learn any new attacks to defeat any of the villains over dozens of episodes. His difficulties in life are mainly interpersonal and societal, as he struggles to find a challenge and reason in fighting and in life, to the point where he's constantly bored and deadpan, clueless to the struggles before him. This adds to the value of smaller characters getting their shine, as more often than not, Saitama is an ex machina and comic relief. This allows for a larger focus on the bureaucracy of the show and what it means to be human as well as a hero. This show is great for everybody. When I recommend an anime to someone who doesn't like anime, my first jump is Death Note. A high school student finds a supernatural book that can kill anyone he writes their names into, and uses its power to kill many criminals in the sake of his own justice. Donning the name Kira, the anime evolves into a long chess game he plays in order to hide himself from the police and their detectives. It's such a short story, you could believe that it was a book if you gave it to somebody. It's really different from most shonen that there's no direct action, it's more of a cat and mouse game between genius minds. I really love the moral ambiguity in the anime because while Light does his actions in the name of justice, he develops a god complex and it comes off as dark and euthanizing. When he killed all those criminals, all I could think of is that he ripped the ability of those criminals to reform, and no anime has ever made me think of that before. It's a show that is a suspenseful and thrilling game of wits, and it's easily enjoyable by all, even by those who try and dismiss anime as a genre. When I first started watching Neon Evangelion Genesis, I had the assumption it'd be like mech series in general, to the point where the mechs are the base for all the actions and interactions between characters and villains. but I was blown away by how little the series relied on it. The Avas that they pilot to fight the planet-terrorizing angels are only accessible for 5 minutes, meaning that the mechs are not the sole focus of the show. Motivations and directions for all the characters are honed in very early in the series, giving them depth, and the action ended up being more of the high peak of an episode instead of a long plateau. However, what makes the show stand apart from the other mech series is the dysfunctionality of all the characters. As the story progresses, it becomes less and less about fighting the angels and more about fighting themselves. The psychological trauma that resides in all of them is so evident at the end that characters are scarred. Even characters that are complete assholes were explained through their tragic backstories, mental fragility, and their constant needs for validation from different things or people, all for respective reasons. None of the characters in this show are one-dimensional, even though they seem so at first, but as the story progresses, you either see the nuances in them, or what's deeper within as they start to unravel. This show is critically acclaimed, and it's controversial for some of the gross things that exist in it. But in my mind, that makes them human, as the toll of mental illness can create some really harrowing scenarios in anime and in reality. The show is also controversial for the last 2 episodes in particular, because fans yearn for closure of many plot lines that existed. It's the direct opposite of Gurren Lagann, as there's not really much fighting at all. But while there's no closure of plotline, the characters gain closure themselves, and I find this to be perfect. It encapsulates the fight of depression, fighting inner demons and angels, and the realization that you need others in your life to support you as you do them for both of you guys to be happy. Get to the 7th one, I want to talk about how much I thought about these next 2 on my list and how difficult it was for me, because they were both created by the same director and they're both very special in their own way. So I want to say that they're impossible for me to compare, and the fact that they're ranked doesn't mean anything in terms of how I think about them. Cowboy Bebop is the most essential anime that you should know, to the point where I don't think it needs an introduction. But to sum it up, the show is about the misadventures of a bounty hunting crew. Their goal is to get money. Not really anything else, it's just straight cash, homie. While this is true, the characters can get caught up in an episode and choose more morally just paths, leaving them hungry and on their next mission. There are one-off episodes here and there, but that doesn't mean that these characters are cardboard cutouts. Someone lazy and laid back might have had their spirit crushed years ago. Someone who runs away very often might have been due to their own tragic past, and some are just weird. But oh my god, the music. It's jazzy and upbeat, it switches up from electronic to tribal chanting. Yoko Kanno, hats off to you. This is a show that gives you something amazing every episode. From amazing fight scenes to dialogue to scenery, this show has everything and will stand as a classic for all time. I want to start this off by saying that Battle Cry is in the pantheon of greatest anime openings ever. Perfectly fits the show and everything aesthetically, but more on that later. Samurai Champloo is built on the premise of a girl named Fu frees 2 samurai, Jin and Mugen, to find the samurai that smells like sunflowers. Their journey contains many one-off episodes with many characters that don't return at all, giving credence to how self-contained they are. While Fu asks for their help, she's not a character that needs to be saved all the time, and she can take care of her own shit and helps the 2 aimless samurai around. Jin and Mugen are perfect foils in that Jin is orthodox and straight edge, while Mugen is wild and unpredictable. It leads to all these characters coming together out of circumstance and nothing else, and when it's over they go their separate ways. But what I was saying before about the music, it's an incredible blend of hip-hop and traditional Japanese music. That's even reflected in the show with actions like tagging, rapping, and even beatboxing. Nujave's created an original sound that was unheard of at the time and basically created the lo-fi genre we all study to at this point. Rest in peace, Nujaves. You will be missed, but you will be remembered in music and anime history for the rest of time. Gintama's the funniest anime ever. There, I said it. I've yet to see something that so easily can parody and make fun of other anime while still having its own humor and direction. They dedicate so much to parodying tropes that it's downright hilarious. My favorite arcs are when characters fight during their popularity polls, or if there's a time skip arc that everyone changes. Simply put, if you're a fan of anime in general, you will love this show for the small references and jokes they leave around. There's also really strong Japanese wordplay and jokes that they use there, but I'm not an expert on that, so I'll let that be for now. The show is funny enough to the point where they can make fun of their own budget and still have low animation and be funny. Literally, some scenes are just shots of their apartment as they talk inside, and it still works. This show is so funny that when you get to the more serious arcs at the end, you miss all the quick random one-shot zany fillers the show offers. It doesn't mean that the serious arcs are bad, because the world building really shows over the 300 plus episodes when it needs to advance the plot. I've yet to see a show that balances serious action with humor like this, and I don't think I ever will. Mob Psycho's theme is apparent in the opening of its second season. Your life is your own. Mob is an unmatched psychic who doesn't dwell on it much. He tries not to use it often and instead finds his time training with the Body Improvement Club, the most wholesome boys ever. Mob is a socially awkward kid with no talents, popularity, or interesting qualities other than his immense psychic powers. In order to have a fulfilling life, he forces himself down the hard road to become a better person, all the while meeting people who have let the same power turn themselves into empty husks, and teaching them that without their psychic powers they're nothing. It is no match for the hard work put in every day by the average human. One delivers a story with a deep message that everyone can relate to and has stuck with me the moment since I've seen it. Also, Reagan is amazingly funny. Up until I watched Hunter x Hunter, I really only watched traditional shonen animes. In my mind, there was always a big villain at the end of each arc and the protagonist would prevail in some large-scale battle. This was one of the shows that subverted that for me. So many arcs I assumed would culminate in some large-scale battle that defeated the villain for good, but each time there was a different ending. Whether it dealt with human emotions like love, or the character's own goals not being total destruction, the lack of action at the end initially left me empty, until I realized what I was witnessing was adept character writing. Not every arc needed a power struggle, and not every plotline needed to be resolved in the same way. That's not to say that the fighting power wasn't present, but it was just more grounded than most. In Hunter x Hunter, the characters didn't grow stronger and defeat their enemies due to friendship or some contrivance, but true resolve, strategy, and sacrifice equal to the powers attained. Bolstered by the most wholesome friendship in history, this show is a must-watch for anyone who loves anime. Like I previously said with Hunter x Hunter, I was conditioned to the power struggle animes in my early youth, so when I came across JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I was blown away. The story that split into different parts for each subsequent descendant in the Joestar family. Each part is completely different from the rest, having different characters, art styles, and themes. One part might be chasing a serial killer in a town, while another is a globe-trotting adventure across the world, and another about mobs in Venice. It draws me in because of the different kinds of action that can exist in the series. So much of it is based on strategy, the different aspals and 9,000 IQ plays that these characters can think of, and they range from epic to downright hilarious. However, the thing that stands out most to me is the designs. Hirohiko Araki designed many of the characters after Greek and Roman architecture, which shows in the statuesque and very symmetrical and realistic human-looking faces as opposed to other anime. This is also apparent with the stands in this show, which are outrageously unique from one to the other. The powers the stand can have range from broken to outright stupid. But with the applications of this show, any stand user can be powerful in the way that they use it and can be deadly if the opponent doesn't know it. So the battles end up being based on strategy and deduction of the opponent. I haven't even mentioned all the pop culture references that exist in this. From luxury brands, the names of the stands themselves being based off tarot cards, Egyptian gods, and even music. It is by far one of the most original works I have ever seen, and I cannot wait for the next parts to be animated as they are incredible in the manga. All this aside, it doesn't hold a candle to the #1 anime on my list. And my #1 anime of all time is Neo Yokio, because Jaden Smith rides robot Jude Law and is best friends with the #1 show on late night, the Bodega Boys. Yo! So you guys think? Did you hate it? Did you like it? Do you want to punch me in the face? Do you want to call me stupid? Do you want to call me ugly? Do you want me to call me anything you want? Please comment below. Please let me know what shows, if you want me to go in depth of any of these lists. If there's anything else you want me to watch or talk about. I have an honorable mentions, and I'm going to start a Google sheet. If you guys have anything, please let me know. Thanks for watching.